It is overtime here again at Old Favorite Friday, talking about incredible classic beers that don't get enough love and respect. And this week we have Sierra Nevada, who's been featured so many times on Old Favorite Friday, and for good reason, and their Ruthless Rye IPA. Now, this is a beer that just came back into the market. This is a beer that I believe started back in 2012 from my research, but I don't know, I didn't get confirmation on that from the Sierra Nevada website. I remember having the beer around that time, so that makes sense. This beer came out and it was actually discontinued. Like many beers that go through breweries that we absolutely love, they end up, for whatever, falling out of favor, or they end up wanting to change up their season or to change up their course. And Sierra Nevada has a lot of beers that I love, like Keller Weiss, like their porter that I can't find, or maybe they're only seasonal in certain areas. But this is one of those beers that was discontinued for whatever reason, unfortunately, and they brought it back in what they called their Fantic box. Now, this is, to the best of my knowledge, only available in Costco. At least that's where I saw it. My good friend Mike Urevich, he told me about this, and there's 4 different beers that come in this Fantic box, including Ruthless Rye, Nooner Pills, and what's the other one I'm talking about? Their brown ale, Tumbler. Tumbler comes in there as well, and there was a red IPA that I wasn't familiar with. But those 3 beers are beers that I absolutely love. Beers that absolutely deserve to be featured on Old Favorite Friday. So that's just a little hint that you're going to see a couple of those beers show up in the future. But Ruthless Rye is what we're talking about this week. This is a red IPA. It's a rye IPA. This was a trend, I guess you would say, back in around that time, the 2010s, early 2010s. A lot of rye beers were coming out. I remember Hebrew made a rye IPA. There's just a lot of them. Rye was being used a lot to add kind of the spicy, peppery flavors that kind of complement hops really, really well, and people were using that a lot. I brewed a lot with rye back in the day, and I really, really like the flavor. And I think it's kind of fallen out of favor for the most part. You don't see a lot of rye beers out there in the market now. And I think people have gone away from maltier beers, really focusing on like tropical hops, and then of course going into your smoothie beers and your pastry stouts and things like that, which is a real shame because the complexities that you get with rye, if you're not just working with barley, which is a primary malt that's used in all beers, and obviously you can use wheat as well. But rye is kind of unheralded. It's really, really, it's a tough grain. It's small. It's like rock hard. It can be difficult to work with, but the flavor profile is so unique and so interesting, and that's what you're getting in here. You're getting that pepperiness. You're getting a little bit of herbaceousness that comes out of it. And it's really, really tasty. And to go along with those kind of like citrusy, like a little bit of grapefruit pith and the hops, you're getting pine resin, kind of that classic West Coast, which makes sense for this beer, West Coast hop profile, pairing up with that really interesting malt flavor. There's also some caramel malt in here, as you can see with that beautiful color, making it kind of a red IPA. One thing I think is a problem is when you have a beer like this, red IPAs in general, is that a lot of times the hops can overpower the malt bill, and kind of it's just red in name only. It's not, you're not tasting that malt flavor, you're just tasting the hops, and the bitterness kind of overwhelms everything. This is an example of something that did really, really well, and by using rye, something that's so flavorful that can balance out some of those hop flavors, that's what you can do with a beer like this, and give it that malt backbone, give it a little bit of that caramel malt that you put in there to balance out with a little bit of sweetness. That just provides just an amazing, amazing flavor profile that we just don't see enough anymore. A lot of times I try these beers for Old Favorite Friday, and some of them I haven't had in a while. Obviously, this one I haven't had because it was discontinued. And the first thing I think is, why haven't we made a rye IPA? Why haven't we brewed with rye more often, using rye in a porter I've used before, which is really, really tasty. This is something I want to do. I'm going to have to talk to Ralph about that and see maybe on the 2025 calendar if we can work a rye beer in to the schedule. I also want to give a shout out to Sierra Nevada. There's so many beers in a brewery like that has made so many great beers over the years, and you have to kill your babies. Unfortunately, sometimes your favorite beers you have to kind of move on from because uh, it just falls out of favor, or it's not the flavor of the month anymore. So you have to move on and do different things. But for them to be able to bring these beers back for people like myself that love these beers, I mean, I wasn't planning on making a trip to Costco. I heard this beer was available and I ran over there. By the time you people see this video, I don't know if it's going to be available still there, but if it is, and you can get your hands on some Nooner, which is great. If you can get your hands on this beer, man, you got to go do it. You got to, and if you're like me and you had this beer when it was first released, take a trip down memory lane and really enjoy fantastic version of a rye beer made from just one of the greatest breweries of all time. So absolutely fantastic there. This is 6.6% beer, so it's not over the top. It's just lovely. It's such a great beer. I'm running out of other things to say about it. It's just great. Talking about food pairings with the rye flavor and kind of the heavy hop, it might be kind of difficult to come up with some of the things that you might want to put with it, but it's really a versatile beer. Going with something like a Reuben sandwich is kind of, you have your rye bread, so that can complement those kind of flavors. It goes well with some fattier meats. I would love actually to put this on like a corned beef sandwich with a lot of horseradish. Horseradish, that earthy, spicy flavor goes really well with the rye. Goes really well with the hops there. I think that would be a dynamite pairing. Anything with like a spicy or brown mustard goes really, really well with rye. I mean, you think about things that would go on like a rye bread sandwich. What are the flavors that would go in there? Those are the same flavors that would work well with this beer. I also am thinking about like kind of earthy vegetables, especially like when they're caramelized. If you were to do like some caramelized like Brussels sprouts with a little bit of like a maple, spicy maple syrup over the top of them, or with some bacon or pancetta, those kind of flavors go really, really well with a beer like that. So a lot of options you can do with this beer if you can get your hands on it. I hope Sierra Nevada, if you're listening, which you assuredly aren't, Kellerweiss, if you can do this again every year and bring back Kellerweiss, I would be a very, very happy man. This is a great idea. I hope more breweries do this kind of thing in the future and really give us a chance to reminisce on beers that are just fantastic and that I miss so much. Please keep telling us your suggestions for Old Favorite Friday. I do want to mention for any of you guys that are making suggestions, just keep in mind that this beer was made way back for the first time in 2012, if I can get that out. We try to do beers that are at least 10 years old. Sometimes we break the rules, but at least 10 years old, and that were relatively widely available, at least in their own market. Maybe it's only available in Michigan, but it's available in grocery stores in Michigan. That's the whole idea of Old Favorite Fridays, that we're doing and talking about great beers that are underappreciated because of their ubiquity or because of their age. So that's just a little cheat sheet. I get a lot of great recommendations, and a lot of them are like, oh, this beer, I just found it the other day, and it was released last year. Yes, I'm sure that's a great beer, but it's not kind of what we're doing here. So thank you guys, though, for engaging with us. Thank you for your comments, and we'll see you next week on Old Favorite Friday. Cheers.